Hey, Brian. Awesome. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Good stuff. So why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell us about what you're doing.
Okay. So my name is Brian Buxton, part-time real estate investor, full-time engineering manager here locally in Rochester. I've been involved in real estate for a while now. It goes back to about 2004 when I bought my first property. It was a house hack before house hacking was a term. I didn't
All
even
right.
didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't know it was a house hack. I was just trying to reduce my living expenses at
You
the time.
figured it out early.
Yeah, I guess so. But what I didn't figure out at the time was to keep going with it. I was very, very passive up until recently, about 3.5 years ago, when I got pretty heavily involved here in Rochester, trying to buy and hold rental properties. And that was a result of me selling that property that I house hacked and held for about 12 years, along with another one that I had bought shortly after that, which was right on the same street. To rewind a little bit further back, that was in Buffalo. My wife and I had lived in Buffalo. Prior to moving to Buffalo, which we did in 2004, we were living in Philadelphia. I was working down there in Philadelphia. And we both decided that we wanted to get closer to home. Buffalo's home for both of us. We were thinking about starting a family and that sort of thing. We wanted to be closer to our parents. So we made that move, but in doing so, my wife was able to find employment. I wasn't. I started working with some friends in a startup company that friends from college, but I wasn't generating any income from that work. So we had to figure out a way to live cheaply, so to speak, which is why we went with the house hack before it was a term. We ended up buying a duplex in North Buffalo. We lived in the lower and rented out the upper. And when we did end up having our first child, my son, who's 14 now, we went and bought a single family home and just kept the duplex and rented out the lower unit that we were living in. It was very passive from that point forward. Just basically held that one and the other one that we bought down the street, and just sat on them. Tenants kept paying the rent, kept paying for the bills. They cash flowed a little bit, which helped pay for some extras in our life, and didn't really think too much of it until we moved to Rochester.
So what changed?
So I took a job here locally in Rochester, and ended up relocating here as a result of that, and just decided that the properties in Buffalo were a little more than I wanted to deal with, being an hour and a half away. It was before I discovered property managers and the fact that I could hire somebody to deal with that sort of thing. So I considered selling them, and thankfully the market was going up pretty steadily in Buffalo. And I had talked to some real estate agents, and they had given me their opinion on what they thought the properties would sell for, which I was floored by. I didn't really think that the values had gone up that much. Again, it wasn't something that I was paying that close attention to. So I decided to sell them. And in the process of going through making that decision, I realized that they had appreciated a fair bit. I had held them, one for 10 years, the other for 12. So the mortgage had been paid down a bit as well. So I was staring at a pretty decent tax bill. And I didn't like the idea of that. So I started researching what I could do to avoid or defer or delay or reduce those taxes in one way or another. And that's how I stumbled upon the 1031 exchange.
Okay.
So I educated myself on that as best as I could, found an intermediary in the Buffalo area to help me through it. And yeah, ended up selling those properties and rolling the proceeds into various different properties here in Rochester.
All right. An intermediary. So there's a specific type of individual that deals with 1031 exchanges?
Yeah, so if you're going to do a 1031 by law, again, and the disclaimer, I'm not a CPA or an intermediary, but this is just my experience. I learned that by law, you have to hire an intermediary who effectively acts as the bank during the transaction. So when you're doing a 1031, you as the individual or the company selling the property and acquiring the new properties or property can't touch or handle the money. It has to flow through an intermediary. And they make sure that everything's done by the books so that you can, process the transaction appropriately so that you don't get fouled up and end up owing those taxes. So yeah, you have to get an intermediary involved. I would also recommend you get a CPA involved to make sure that you're doing everything by the book. And then that individual acts as your escrow, I guess, is the way to put it, maybe the escrow account, where when the properties you're selling, those proceeds go directly to the intermediary. That person holds those funds until you're ready to apply them to something else.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're not just, getting a big chunk of money and they're not relying on you to, I promise I'll put it into a like property.
Right. And so the intermediary helps you make sure that you stay within the lane and do everything that you should be doing and dot your I's and cross your T's and get it all right. And there's a whole bunch of other rules that you have to abide by, time in which you have to find new property and close on a property. And
so there are time restraints.
There are time restraints. I don't remember them exactly, but they're not that generous. Somewhere 60 to 90 days, you've got to identify another property. It might even be less than that, where the identification, and then you have to close on the property within a certain time frame as well.
What's the big scary thing that happens if you don't hit that time frame?
You pay your taxes.
Pay your taxes, right? Jeez. Now, as far as you said, you sold a duplex and a single family, and that's where these proceeds came from.
They were both duplexes.
Duplexes. Okay.
Yep. They were identical houses on the same street, 2 doors away from one another.
It's convenient for management when it was you, right?
It was. Yeah. It did make it easy. Yeah.
So when you deployed the funds, the gains from that sale, did it matter what type of property you purchased on the other side?
There's a lot of freedom to operate in terms of what type of property you buy. But you do have to buy something that is worth more than what you sold.
Okay.
And if you have mortgages or financing on what you sold, which I did, you have to get into something new that has financing that is at least as much as you had or more. So you have to step up.
Okay.
You can't step down. You can't sell a property and put it in a 1031 exchange and go buy something that's less expensive or less valuable. It doesn't work that way. You got to step up.
Okay. That makes sense.
What I did is I didn't go out and seek 1 or 2 properties that were worth more than what I sold. Actually, I don't think one of the properties that I bought in and of itself cost more than what I sold. I bought multiple properties that were the total sum of which met the criteria.
Okay, and that still met the criteria, like you said. All right, that's cool.
Yep.
So you get less expensive houses, but just kind of more of them. Turn like 2 into 4.
More of them. Yep.
Sure.
So I had to make sure that when you added up the sales price of all of those different properties, it was more than what I sold my places for. And when I added up the financing that I put on all those new properties, it was more than what I had on what I sold.
Within the rules.
So keeping spreadsheets and keeping track of everything was a bit of a pain, but I'm glad I did it.
Makes sense. I'm sure the amount of tax savings had been pretty incredible.
Yeah, well, I did. I ended up deferring. I didn't really save it.
True,
Taxes don't go away.
True,
right? It's a deferral. So you're basically kicking the can down the road. But it was pretty significant. Yeah. Thankfully, I haven't had to write the IRS a check.
Always a good thing. Any tax saving is a good savings. What changed for you when you came to Rochester? Like, why, for your words, you were passive, very passive, right? In investing in Buffalo. Did you just decide, or what changed for you that made you go a little more aggressive in the investing? I mean, how many doors what do you own now here?
So right now, as we sit here, I've got 26.
Okay.
doors, and another 17 under contract that should have closed at the end of last year. And that's maybe a podcast in and of itself.
No.
But we're waiting to close those, and hopefully after this pandemic eases up a little bit, we'll be able to get the deal done. But yeah, so right now 26 and 17 on the way.
So what was the switch? Was there just one day you woke up here in Rochester and said, or did you plan on like, we're going to Rochester and this is what I'm gonna get more heavy into this?
I guess when I decided to sell the places in Buffalo and decided to defer the taxes through 1031, my wife and I started to kick around what we might want to do with the proceeds and where we would want to reinvest. And we thought about, should we buy a vacation home somewhere where we might want to retire one day and Airbnb it until that day comes? Everything in between that and investing in larger syndications or just going out and buying individual properties. And when I started to look into Rochester as an option, the thing that really surprised me was the inverse of what it was in Buffalo, which was property values and rents. So in Rochester, as compared to Buffalo, at least, is being what I was used to, the property values were a lot more affordable, and the rents that you would get from the properties were a lot higher than you could in Buffalo. So that really piqued my interest to study it a bit more and learn more about it. And then when I realized the potential for cash flow here in the Rochester area based on those two facts, was I guess what really got me going and really interested me in it. And I, at that point in time, saw it as an avenue to financial independence, whereby if I kept my nose down and kept doing it and ran it efficiently as I could, there was a light at the end of the tunnel where I could replace my income with, my W-2 income with passive income from rental properties.
And that's the magic number.
It is indeed.
That's the magic number. That's awesome. Where do you, so how do you find your properties? You got you direct mail, bandit signs?
No, I'm pretty traditional. Most of my properties I found on the MLS.
Okay.
A handful were off-market deals through word of mouth, just networking and meeting folks, talking to different realtors. I have found a couple that were off-market, but I would say 90% of what I have was MLS.
And these mostly single-family, multifamily?
No, mostly multifamily. I do have 3 doors are single family houses. And I bought those as a small package of 3 from a seller. That was part of the first transaction that I did coming out of that 1031.
Okay.
But then I also have a mix of doubles. I've got 1 triple and 1 fourplex right now.
All in a similar area?
No, I'm in different areas. And there are areas that I like to avoid, but I don't have one specific area that I try to focus on. I know some people do, but there's, Rochester is a diverse area. There's a lot of decent areas to invest in, at least I think. So I try to keep my mind open when opportunities arise, and don't try to just say no to an opportunity because it might not be in one area that I like.
So you're typically buy and hold. You're not flipping any of these.
I am not flipping anything. No. Flipping just isn't something that I've really focused on. I'm more of definitely a buy and hold guy. I think a lot of that has to do with the time involved in flipping, at least to get started in it. That I feel like there's a lot of time required, a big time commitment. I have a family. I've got a W-2 job that I have to attend to. So the buy and hold aspect of things is what I've really focused on. So no, flipping hasn't been something that I've explored.
Okay. The type of properties you get, are they mostly turnkey, or do you have to do a lot of work to these, or just, basics kind of, cosmetics and you're set?
Yeah, mostly cosmetics in your set. I would say that's pretty much everything that I've gotten to this point. In most cases, I'm trying to think of an opportunity where this wasn't the case, and I don't think I have one, or an example, I should say. In most cases, everything that I've acquired has already had tenants in it, and they've stuck with the property at least for a period of time after I acquired it.
Okay.
Now, of course, when a tenant would move out, that's when we would go in and spruce up the unit and get it ready for the next tenant, but nothing major. I'm not tearing down walls or replacing bathrooms or
Okay.
anything like that.
All right. That makes sense. Do you manage these yourself at this point, or do you have a management company that takes care of the doors now?
So I've got a management company that I work with on half of the doors. It's more of a full service type of management company. And as I've acquired additional properties, I was managing them myself, which is the other half of the portfolio that I have right now. And I've just recently started with working with another management company on those to at least handle the maintenance side of things.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So the management is something that you'd recommend. I mean, have you found it's easier to go after more deals and focus a little bit more on acquisitions than management once you've at least gave like half your portfolio, off to a company?
I think so. But at least for me, I think it's important to at least manage in the beginning when you're small and it's manageable for yourself to do. I think it's important to do it. I think you learn a lot. And it helps you understand what to look for in a management company. It helps you understand what's important to you. And you want to find those sort of qualities in the management company that you would end up working with. Plus, it gives you the knowledge of what goes into it, what's involved in finding a tenant, screening a tenant, what's involved in the repair side of things. I think if you don't have that knowledge and understanding, and you just go out and you hire a management company, I think you're flying a little bit blind, and you have to leave a lot up to a third party that sometimes might not always have your best interest in mind.
Sure. Okay. That makes perfect sense. What's the best advice you've received up to this point that you'd be willing to share?
I would say just stay determined. And it's not really a real estate piece of advice. It's just more of a personal motivation piece of advice. Is you're gonna make mistakes. I would say don't let them deter you from continuing to press forward. Obviously when you're going into deals or going into situations, use everything that at that point in time to reduce the risk as much as possible. But don't be afraid to pull the trigger. And don't be afraid of making a mistake. Just try to minimize them as much as you can.
Sure.
And continue to push.
Yeah, that seems to be a consistent message that a lot of the guys I've talked to. It's consistency, it's drive, it's take action, and don't completely be afraid of what you don't know, because you're not going to know everything up front.
Exactly. That's right. And you got to get yourself in the right mindset for it, because you're going to run into things that are going to upset you. And you can't let that deter you from continuing, right? Tenants can leave you up, and leave the place a wreck, and you've got to get in there and get it ready and put somebody else in there. And that's a pain in the butt, and, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth, but you got to keep pushing. It's
Sure.
worth it in the end.
Well, that's the thing, right? You have to determine your why, and as long as your why is strong enough, then that's what's going to carry you through those tough days.
Right.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So other than the IRS handbook on 1031 exchanges, what you got any recommendations for reading? Any book readings? Any books you're reading right now?
I mean, this one is everybody's go-to, but I would say you got to read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Thank you. I've heard it on Bigger Pockets 384 times, and nobody said it yet on this show, so I appreciate that.
You got to read that book. Yeah. If anybody's listening that hasn't read it yet, and you've just got to. It really changed my perspective on money, and how to earn money, and the flip side of going to work every day. I was definitely the poor dad. And that was me to the T. Get the education, get the good job, go to work, put money in the 401k, hope and pray for 30 years that it's worth enough for you to retire on at the end of the day.
Sounds like the same playbook I was handed as a kid. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say, I think that's one of the best books to read if you're thinking about getting into real estate. And
I agree.
It really has nothing to do with real estate. It doesn't tell you how to buy a house, doesn't tell you how to rent a house or flip a house. But I think it's one of the fundamental books for me, at least.
I think a big thing, and we talk about this a little bit here on the show, but it's a lot of mindset, and that it shifted my mindset. Now I heard people before, recommend this book, recommend the book, changed my life. And it did. I read the book. I mean, it absolutely just rewired my brain of what I was looking at. And then, kind of put me in a little bit of a depression for a while of, wish I read this book 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But, I'm glad I at least did come across it. But that's a good one. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I recommend that to anybody I talk to about this. And they ask, what can I do to get started, or what information's out there? And it is, if you got to shift your mindset first, all the, 2 + 2 will equal 4 no matter what you're doing. But it is getting your mind right and understanding that the other side of it, and there's a, whatever means to the end that you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I mean, I've read real estate books, of course, but I typically don't really recommend real estate books because there's so many different avenues that you can take. And I think that's a personal choice based on what your interest is and what way you'd like to go in terms of real estate investing. But I think books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad are game changers. There's another one called Killing Sacred Cows by a guy named Garrett Gunderson. I think it's an amazing book. It cuts against what everything, the masses have been taught in terms of, scrimp and save and put your money, hand your money over to a financial planner for 30 years and hope that the market does its thing.
Sure.
It flies in the face of all of those things, hence the term or the title, Killing Sacred Cows.
Wow.
So if you're the person that is a tried and true 401k saver and stuffs every penny in their IRA and hopes the market, gives you the retirement that you deserve, reading or listening to that book will probably make your hair set on fire. But for me, it's recommended reading.
Outstanding. Well, I don't think anybody that's that's who's going to be listening to this is going to be somebody that's looking to think outside of that proverbial box, I guess, and see their money a different way, and what is the difference between an asset and a liability. And those, sounds like you got a couple of good book recommendations here. Anybody want to reach out to you? Do you have an email they can reach out to you? I'm going to put I'll put links in the show notes for people to reach out.
Sure. Yeah. Anybody can email me if they want to reach out. My email address is hobmoorave@gmail.com. It's hobmoorave@gmail.com. It's our first rent. That was the first house in Buffalo.
Okay.
Was on a street called Hobmoor Avenue. So that's the name of our LLC that holds some of the properties. It's Hobmoor Ave LLC. But you can put that in the show notes. I don't have a website. I don't
just
have an
has
IG
any questions
account or an FB account. So anybody can reach out that way.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Well, you got anything else you wanted to go over today?
No, not really. I'd like to ask you about your real estate investing. I think I've heard on some of the previous podcasts that you've done. It sounds like you've got one deal under your belt. Do I get that right?
Yep, I did. I ended up doing the Burr Strategy on a single family house in Gates. It worked out well. I learned a lot of lessons from that one. We, my wife and I and a buddy of mine did all the work ourselves. It took a year to do it. I learned a lot. I think just as far as what my strengths are, things that I like to do and things I'll never do again. But it did work for me. And the biggest thing I took away from that is I set a goal. I came across Bigger Pockets. same thing. I came out of the military, had a good job, just felt there was another way to make money and another way to maybe try to make time in my life, especially with the little ones. They shifted my entire world.
Sure.
Once I had them, I realized that I wasn't spending any time with them, and that didn't seem like a good way to be a dad. So, so we ended up getting the house, but I learned about the Burr Strategy. I set things up. I networked. I talked to agents. I went through houses, and eventually I put in an offer and got the house, got keys, had no idea what to do with it. We just started tearing things apart and then rebuilding it slowly, and it worked out well. So yes, it is a cash flowing property now. All my money came back to me that I had put into it in my refinance. So that was
a good
nice.
Feeling, right?
It is. It's a good feeling. In the midst of all this, I started shifting a little bit away from trying to build this portfolio of single family homes or small multifamilies, and started checking out niches. And I think you were talking about that. When people look at real estate books, it really depends on that niche. For me, I came across self-storage a few different times, and it kept looking attractive to me. And the more I looked into it, the more attractive it looked. And so I've drilled down now at this point, and that is exactly what I'm looking for as a self-storage facility somewhere on the East Coast.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my goal. In fact, I just got an email from a broker in Florida. I did a mailer, so I'm at the point where I've set out a mailer, telling everybody I want to buy one. I've got a couple deals I'm analyzing, and I'm working with a good group through Michael Wagner. I don't know if you know Michael, but he has a Storage Rebellion, and it's a very good educational mindset site that's put out a lot of support. So that's my next step, is buying a self-storage facility. And most people think I'm a little crazy when I say that, except for people that know what I can do for you. So.
Right. Yeah, no, I think they're really interesting, especially when you think about the fact that, you're not going to get calls to unclog a toilet.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it comes with its own whatnot, but yeah, there's something to be said about not having any plumbing run underneath your property. And
it's simple. It seems like a very simplified model of
it really did
residential real estate. Which
the concepts are there, right? The concepts are the same. I mean, you look for something that, you find something maybe half full, or that's been mismanaged, and you come in and all it takes is small tweaks. That's the nice thing about what I found with self-storage, is that the scalability of it. I assume it's similar to maybe apartment buildings, right? I mean, you make small tweaks to rent or expenses, and it changes the NOI of the property, which then increases its value just with small changes. And that's what really impresses me is how much value you can extract from a property if you manage the deal right from beginning to end.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's definitely where I want to go next, is not self-storage, but into commercial residential, where some of those factors are more at play in terms of making small tweaks to the management, reducing your operating expense or improving the property in such a way where you can drive rents up and thus drive the value of the property in that way. I think is really an awesome way to go about it. I haven't made that leap yet, but I think that's my next step.
Right. I mean, the next 1031, you're gonna have to step up. So maybe that's the way to go.
Maybe. Although I don't want to sell anything that I have, because they're cash flowing so well. So.
Don't necessarily have to, right? I mean, but that's
that's right.
Something said if you can get those same 26 doors under one roof. That's something said for that. Absolutely. Well, man, I appreciate your time. It was very cool talking with you, and we'll chat again. I know Marty and Gary Van Bortle.
Yeah, I've met Gary once or twice. I don't know him real well, but we've met. Yeah.
Him and John Belinsky and Martin Grisanti. So those guys, I think I don't want to mess up their company name, so I just won't even say it. But I think they just got Tippery Hill Apartments.
Syracuse, right?
Yeah, Tippery Hill. Yeah, I think they just got it on Google, and those guys are great. I went to a couple of their meetups before, because again, I was on a niche hunt myself, right? I was single family, multifamily, and it's like, you know what? I don't know that I have to wait till I have 10 doors to then start considering small apartments. So I was looking that way. And that's how I kind of eventually led into commercial real estate, and then found the self-storage that way. But yeah, those guys are good guys. And I'd say, they're always willing to share. So you start looking that way, have questions on that, they'd be the ones to reach out to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've met them before, it seems like a great great group of guys. And that's the thing, like, the way you found your way into the single family home and now self-storage, it's just, meeting people and not being afraid to put yourself out there and getting to know, folks, and, you'll learn as you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. For those people don't know, this is the first time you and I are chatting. So this is this is the way to meet people and get to know them. And this is really cool. I'm glad you did this. Thank you very much, Brian.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck, buddy.
All right. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.